So how can we use the phrase by the way? It can be used in different ways and for different reasons in different situations. So let's talk about how we can use it, and we'll talk about some other phrases that are very similar and how we can use those. Obviously, we're going to learn by example. Now, generally speaking, when we say by the way, what we mean is by the way, what we mean is as a side point. We can use it to change topics when we suddenly want to bring up a new thing, or we could use it to, if we're on a topic, slightly change and mention something that's close to it. Now, if that sounds confusing, fine. Don't worry about it. We'll go through some examples. One thing that's really common when we're talking with someone is to say something like, by the way, I'm Luke. Now, this is when I've met someone and they don't know my name, but we've been talking for a while. If we've been talking for 20 minutes about a topic, we've just met, I want you to know my name, so I'll say, by the way, my name is Luke. Now, when you begin a conversation, why not say it then? It's very awkward to say, my name is Luke, now let's begin a conversation. It never happens like that. I was talking to a guy on the subway yesterday for 20 minutes on the way home. I had never met him before. We were talking about train delays and all that stuff, and we were talking. He was telling me about his life and all the girls he dated in other places. It was very interesting. Then, before he left, before he got off, because his stop was earlier than mine, I said, oh, by the way, I'm Luke. And he said his name. That's how you do it. You say your name later, if at all. You don't have to. But the point is, when you want to slightly change something, you use by the way. So let's look at a few other examples of this. By the way, did you hear about the recent outbreak in Washington State? Now, maybe we're talking about the virus outbreak, and I want to mention something about that, but slightly different. Maybe you're talking about the virus outbreak in China, and I say, oh, by the way, did you hear about the recent outbreak in Washington State? Or perhaps we're just generally talking about the news. And if we're generally talking about the news, I might bring up some other news, and to sort of slightly change it, I'll say, oh, by the way, did you hear about the virus outbreak in Washington State? Now, if we're talking about something completely unrelated, can I say, by the way, did you hear about the Washington State outbreak? Perhaps. It is a good way to change direction. Usually we're going to be on something that's closely related or not too far away. Then when I say, by the way, it sounds natural. I'm just sort of moving in a slightly different direction. That's the idea. We were supposed to leave an hour ago, by the way. Now, this is a little different. This is when I want to mention it, but it's too late, right? I want to tell you something almost because I resent it. You're here talking to this person. You're my only way to get home because you drove, and you drove me here, wherever we are, maybe some party or something. And you're busy talking to someone, and I walk up to you and say, we were supposed to leave an hour ago, by the way. Okay? Now, we use that not because we're on a related topic, but because I just want to let you know, even though it's too late, that that's what happened in the past. So we use it like this as well. Okay? Both of these are very common. By the way, do you think you could drive me to school tomorrow? Now, let's say this is a son or a daughter asking their father to drive them to school. Okay? This could be something sudden. So sometimes we use by the way to just bring up a new topic, right? Bring up a new thing. We're talking about other things. We're eating breakfast together. I have a way to go to school today, but I say to father, dad, by the way, do you think you can drive me to school tomorrow? It could be apropos of nothing. That means it could be completely unrelated to anything we're talking about. He's reading the newspaper, and I just suddenly say, oh, by the way. It's a good way to bring up a topic like that. So if it's a simple everyday thing, you can use by the way to just suddenly bring something up. You can use by the way to say when something is a bit too late and you want the other person maybe to feel a little guilty about it. And you can use it when you're in a related topic, talking about something not too far away from it, and you want to mention something else, right? Close by in the similar topic. Not too far away from what we're saying, either news or whatever it is, okay? So that's how we use by the way. Now we have a similar phrase here. While I'm on the subject, this sounds more formal, more polite in some situations. So you only will use this one when you want to give a feeling of being a little bit serious. You're having an academic conversation. While I'm on the subject, and then you bring up the thing. While I'm on the subject, do you happen to have that $40 you borrowed? But we have to be on the subject. What subject? Well, we could be on the subject of money. Maybe we're talking about money and our expenses and how much things cost. So we're kind of on the subject of money. I'm talking about how much my rent is and all of that stuff. And I say, oh, by the way, while I'm on the subject, we can use by the way, or just while I'm on the subject, do you have that $40 you borrowed yesterday? It's a good way to bring something up suddenly. If they're talking about something that's also related, while we're on the subject, you could say while we're on the subject, or even while you're on the subject, but usually it will be while we're on the subject. Do you happen to have that $40 you borrowed from me? Or we could say, are you going to the book club Saturday? Okay, now what are we talking about? What's the subject? Well, it's probably something related to books, authors, events that we go to, whatever category can fit both the book club thing that we do on Saturday and whatever else we're talking about. While we're on the subject of the weekend plans, events, books, authors, whatever it may be, while we're on the subject, are you planning to go to the book club on Saturday? It's a sort of by the way thing. And you could say, by the way, are you planning to go to the book club on Saturday? Same thing. Same thing. While we're on the subject, just feels a little bit more formal. While I'm on the subject, do you think you could come in on Saturday? Now, this is maybe a boss talking to someone on the staff, right? A boss talking to someone on the staff might say something like, oh, while we're on the subject, or while I'm on the subject of, what is the subject? Maybe it's how much hard work we have to do on this project we're doing. Maybe it's the fact that some other people had to do overtime. Maybe it's the fact that I had to stay late yesterday. Maybe it's the fact that you are making sure that you're getting paid for the overtime work that you did last weekend. Okay. Oh, yes, of course. You will absolutely be paid double time for the work that you did last weekend. While I'm on the subject, do you think you could come in this weekend as well? Do you think you could come in on this Saturday as well? So it's a way to say, yes, you will be recognized and paid for what you did before, but I also want you to work extra because maybe we have work to catch up on. That's the idea. Now we have one more that's very similar. Since you mentioned it, this is again very similar to by the way and while we're on the subject. Since you mentioned it. But this one is you who said it, and because you said something, I'm bringing up something. This is common when we have been wanting to say something, but we have to wait for the right time. If I just suddenly say, you owe me $40, give me my $40 back. That does not feel nice, especially with friends, right? That feels so awkward. So we'll wait for an opportunity when you're talking about money or money people owe you or expenses or whatever. Then we'll say, since you mentioned it, do you think you could give me that $40 you owe me? Right? Because you mentioned it, I'm waiting for the opportunity. Since you mentioned it, I will take a small decaf coffee. Thanks. Now, what about this one? Since you mentioned it, I will. What did they say? I'm going to go out and get some coffee. Is anyone interested? Yeah, since you mentioned it, I wouldn't have asked you to get a coffee unless you had offered. So your offer is mentioning it. So, yeah, I want one now that you said that you are going to go get one and that you're offering other people to get one for them. So, yeah, since you mentioned it. Or sometimes we say, now that you mention it, yes, I would, right? Since you mentioned it, you remember you owe me that $40? It's very useful, very useful. Since you brought it up, this is basically the same thing. Brought it up is exactly the same as mention it. I was actually thinking of canceling. Okay, we're talking about the event. Maybe it's the book club. Maybe I'm the host of the book club. What about the book club? Well, you want to go to the book club. We're talking about the book. We're on the topic. You know what? Since you mentioned it, I'm thinking about canceling. I'm so tired this week. I have so much extra work I need to do. I don't know if we can do it. I've been thinking about canceling, but we're on the topic. That's the point. We're on the topic. One more of these. Now that you mention it, same thing, remember? I guess she does look like Shakira. Shakira is a musician, right? So if you say, you know what, she looks like Shakira. Do you think she looks like Shakira? I wouldn't have said that by myself. I wouldn't have noticed that she looks like Shakira. Right? I wouldn't have gone out of my way to say, that lady over there looks like Shakira. But since you mentioned it, now that you brought it up, I see the resemblance. She kind of does look like Shakira. You're kind of right. Okay, so hopefully these phrases are fairly easy to understand. They're all very common. They're all very closely related, as you can see from the examples. If you really want to learn this and get a feeling for this, the only thing you can do really is make your own examples. Write down your own examples, and you will, over time, begin to feel how they're used, and then next time you're in a conversation, it'll just come out of your mouth. That's how to learn expressions. Hopefully you understand these at least. Now, if you haven't, don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to see my future videos, and check out my links in the description. All right.